Me,
Well, good morning and welcome to WACO, the Water Advisory Committee of Orange County. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to invite Director Wayne Miller to lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, welcome to Cinco de Mayo. I tried to learn a little bit about it, and I went to my library, google.com, and tried to find out, and I found out that Cinco de Mayo stands for the Battle of Puebla, when the rebels in Mexico defeated the invaders' French army. However, most Mexicans don't know that or don't remember that. I found another piece of information that says that a large beer company actually wanted to increase the sales for the summer and decided to find a good date. And they found Cinco de Mayo to sell to the growing population, Hispanic population in the U.S. So Cinco de Mayo is a real American holiday, so enjoy it with Budweiser. I'd like to invite Director Kathy Green to give us the report on Aqua.
Good morning. Aqua's been engaged in numerous arenas to advance priority issues in addition to hosting events. Next week, Aqua is hosting their spring conference and exhibition in Monterey, May 9th through 12th, which I'll be attending and hope all of you are too. Hang on. This report is long and heavy. Sorry about that. So somebody has to do it. Aqua's been taking a high-level look at recent activities and initiatives, which include, 1, long-term conservation frameworks. So the Brown administration on April 7th released the final framework for updating the state's approach to long-term conservation for both the urban and agricultural sectors. Following the release, Aqua is now focusing on bills in the legislature that will implement this framework. Aqua and the water community, including the Orange County Water District, are actively supporting 2 bills, both Rubio bills, AB 968 and AB 1654. Both bills passed out of Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee on April 25th and now move to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. The bills are based on concepts developed by the water community to establish new water efficiency targets for urban retail water suppliers to enhance water supply shortage planning and response. The Assembly Committee also narrowly approved 3 Aqua bills that Aqua is opposing, that were amended to include the Brown administration's proposed language and other provisions, all Friedman bills, AB 1667, AB 1668, and AB 1669. They deal with water efficiency standards and use and reporting. They're all supported by NRDC, Clean Water Action, the Sierra Club, and others. A budget trailer bill containing language to implement the Brown administration's long-term water conservation proposal is now pending. Aqua opposes the use of budget trailer bills to advance substantive changes in state law and urges its members to also oppose the budget trailer bill. I think I've sent out alerts to all of your agencies. 2, federal advocacy on infrastructure. With the Oroville Dam emergency underscoring the critical role of water infrastructure, President Donald Trump released a 2018 budget blueprint on March 16th that includes $4 million increase for EPA's state revolving fund program for water and wastewater projects. Keep an eye on those. Aqua is advocating for robust funding in 2018 for new storage, water recycling, and desalination programs authorized in the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, WIN. Clean Water and Jobs for California, a coalition of business, agriculture, labor, and water interests, of which Aqua is a member, also sent letters to President Trump, the congressional delegation, and Governor Jerry Brown, asking to make the investment in water infrastructure as a top priority for 2017. Third, we're looking to water storage investment program. Aqua has commissioned a technical study targeted for release in May on the benefits of integrating new surface and groundwater storage projects that exist with existing storage and conveyance infrastructure. The study is intended to help inform the California Water Commission's process for allocating $2.7 billion in funding for new water storage projects under Prop 1. So that's now being out there. Proponents for new water storage projects in California can now submit their applications for Prop 1 funding of public benefits related to new water storage projects. The California Water Commission launched the application on March 14th, and the application deadline is August 14th, and CWC is expected to issue early funding decisions in May or June of 2018. And then we're looking for drinking water solutions for disadvantaged communities. This is what you hear a lot about these days. The Aqua Board of Directors at its March 31st meeting approved an action plan to address drinking water solutions for rural and disadvantaged communities. The DAC action plan, which was developed by the Aqua Board appointed task force, identifies problems, solutions, and Aqua actions in the categories of 1, informational needs, 2, technical needs, 3, managerial needs, and 4, financial needs. The plan emphasizes that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to the problem, and that state-led activities should be transparent and allow for the public and stakeholder input. Aqua actions identified the plan include engaging the State Water Resources Control Board to develop comprehensive information about affected communities and their needs. The task force met with the State Water Board staff on April 21st to work on draft needs assessments for operations and maintenance funding needs in the DACs. Aqua will continue to engage in the issue to ensure that the development and implementation of solutions are reasonable and effective in protecting the interests of their members. One big problem with DAC is there's really no definition for what a disadvantaged community is. So you really need to get involved in that. So, thank you very much for your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions, and hope to see you all in Monterey.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll probably follow up in the following month with the commission to see how they assign the money. Now, to give us the state of the Met is Director Larry Dick.
Good morning. One of the great things about being associated with Met is you get to associate with Bill Hasencamp. He's going to be speaking to you a little later this morning, and I know he'll get an appropriate introduction from our team here at WACO. Those of you who don't know, he's also a world champion 21 player, does mountain biking. I've seen pictures of his wife. He's a good salesman. He's married far above himself. He is also a genuine expert on the topic of which he will speak, and he, like many experts, is able to take it, condense it into language that even I understand, and make the ability to understand the message far more comfortable for those of us on the receiving end. I'm really pleased that you were able to get our associate, Mr. Hasencamp, to get up at, before breakfast and come out here today. Where do you live, Bill?
West LA.
West LA. Yeah, I'm sure that was fun. Coming down the 405, you know that's 4 or 5 miles an hour any time of day. The report on Met, for example, next week we'll be having our committee meetings and our board meeting. I'm excited to tell you that Real Property is a committee that has evolved in the past few years. I remember when Wes Bannister, who, as you know, was a leader in the city of Huntington Beach and then served with distinction on the Orange County Water District Board, was succeeded by another fabulous city leader. Wes made it his goal to try to get the corporate arms at Met around the real estate holdings. At that time, water supply had, some land over here, and engineering had some over here in the city. Wes's vision was to get it all together and put it under Real Property, and that has finally, it's been done a while. That's been done, and we're now, with the Real Property Committee, able to assess certain areas, and we'll be surplusing some property. So for those of you who are anxious to buy some distinctive land right outside Diamond Valley Lake, your opportunity might be coming your way. If you want to open that RV park, that bait shop, leave the hustle and bustle of the 405. Here's your chance. We're going to extend the term of our auditor. We have a policy to review our audit team every, I can't remember now whether it's every 5 years, whatever it is, but they're well within that, and we're going to extend that for another year. We're going to discuss, and I'd bet money that we pass a new wastewater system for Lake Matthews. When we were out at Lake Matthews, we were there, we were the pioneers. Remember the pioneers, the ones that get shot full of arrows by the Indians. There was nothing there, and so we had to have a more rudimentary sewer system. How about that? Well, now we're going to be able to tie into a line, so that's going to be something that'll make it better for the folks at Lake Matthews. We're going to rehabilitate the East Orange County Feeder number 2. And valve there. It's water. It's a telephone number price tag, but something needs to be done. The Appendix A is out. For those of you who enjoy, reading about that, and I think it is a good way to understand the Metropolitan Water District, is to survey Appendix A. For those of you who are not in the bond market, Appendix A is the sort of thing that has to come out prior to issuing bonds. And it would appear that we anticipate issuing about $400 million worth of bonds moving forward. The authorization to sell them does not mean they're going to rush out the next day and sell, but we want to be prepared when the time comes and we can redeem other bets or whatever. We're also going to be working on the second lower feeder. It's about a $10 million price tag there on some steel lining. And ultimately, something I am very pleased to report, post 9/11, we entered into, I'm going to venture to say everybody in this room, a reassessment of our personal security, our corporate security, our professional responsibilities as far as security is concerned. We just finished a reassessment of that by Johnson Controls. And I'm proud to tell you that the team that Metropolitan put together post 9/11 did such a crackerjack job that even at this date, some 15 years, 16 years later, we're able, and again, I know it's real money, but a couple of $1 million in the size of organization that Metropolitan is the only area that looks like needs to be strengthened, and that's mostly in widgets and gizmos. The people that are in place, the cameras in place, trying to keep our water supply safe is still there. Ultimately, I'm here and Linda is not. I know you're disappointed not to get your water factoid that Linda always has. So in parting, I would say that in the ongoing saga of the lawsuit between San Diego County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, something new and exciting is happening. I note that emissaries from San Diego County Water Authority have come to Orange County to meet with certain folks, cities, as I'm told, and taxpayer associations, talking about the way Metropolitan has perhaps not done the job that they think we should have done. Metropolitan makes mistakes. I'm certainly honest enough with you to admit that, but some of the things that we're accused of continues to be confusing to me. They were concerned about Metropolitan's lack of reliability, hence their development of a capital expenditure plan for San Diego County that was larger than Metropolitan's for 6 counties serving 19 million people. That lack of reliability disturbed them greatly, yet 80% of their water supply still has to travel through Metropolitan's pipes. They were here talking about overcharges and things of that nature. Overcharges to them might just be better sales to you or me. But it's a lawsuit. It's that time of year. There's a lot of it out there. I will leave you with this factoid. If you're a customer buying treated water in Orange County, the Municipal Water District of Orange County will provide that from Metropolitan to your firm for $1,083 an acre foot. And if you are a customer in San Diego County that's buying treated water from the San Diego County Water Authority, who gets that water delivered to them, treated and under pressure, for $1,546. Now, for those of you who don't have your calculators out, I believe you're going to find that's a 43% increase over what MODOC charges. So when Heather gets up here, make sure you realize how cheap we are. She's probably paying us for the opportunity to work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dick. There is proposed legislation in Sacramento now that may affect or will affect your city, your water district, and to make sure that you take the proper action, we are spelling out what the difference is between those proposals. We have invited our own Heather Baez of MODOC to tell us about it and to give some idea what you can do to help protect your agency against this legislation.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm sure a lot of you are kind of tired of seeing me and hearing about this. And I would ask to see a show of hands of who is, but my 11-year-old has recently started trolling me on Instagram, and I can only take so many hits to my self-esteem in one day. So, all right. Let's go. So I just have one slide for you this morning. Director Green kind of went over the governor's executive order, what that is, making conservation a California way of life. There are 3 different approaches that have been introduced. The same day that the final report came out, the governor introduced, or he didn't introduce trailer bill language, and that's kind of what I'm going to explain to you is the difference between the Friedman bill route, the Rubio bill route, and the possible trailer bill language. Trailer bill language is just that. It's language. It's not a trailer bill yet. It is language that has been drafted, and it's on the Department of Finance's website. It needs to have a vehicle to move forward, a bill number, like an AB 1669. So Assemblywoman Friedman took almost everything in the trailer bill language and put it into her 3 bills. The biggest deviation from the trailer bill language is in AB 1667, which is the agriculture portion. That goes a little bit farther than what the governor proposed. 1668 and 1669 are almost identical. The water community has drafted AB 968 and AB 1654. These 2 bills were based on a stakeholder process, and I think that's something that we really need to convey to our delegation, to members of the legislature, and to the community. Legislation that affects us all should be done collaboratively, and that's what the Rubio bills have done. The Friedman bills come directly from the trailer bill language. It was written with a very narrow scope, no input from the water community other than, what happened at the working group, and then they took that and sort of drafted their own language. So you're probably asking, okay, here we have this, what do we, what's the status now, where are we now? So as Director Green stated, both the Friedman bills and the Rubio bills were heard in Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife. The Friedman bills passed on a party line vote, Republicans voting no, and then Assemblyman Rudy Salas also voted no on AB 1667, the Ag one. The Rubio bills passed unanimously. They are now in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. It's expected that they will be heard on May 17th. The Assembly any Appropriations Committee has what we call a suspense file. It's likely that they will end up on suspense, and to get off suspense, it takes some lobbying by the authors of the bill and proponents for that particular piece of legislation. So it needs to get any legislation that's on a suspense file in the Assembly or Senate, but we're only talking about the Assembly here. The fiscal deadline is May 26th. So to keep any of these bills moving, it needs to get out of the Assembly Appropriations Committee by May 26th. So what we as a water community are doing, yesterday there was a working group at Aqua. They put up the list of the Assembly Appropriations Committee members. That we sort of divvied them out based on who had relationships with whom, and that we are targeting those members and saying, hey, this is important legislation that we took months drafting and putting together, and we would appreciate your support on this. So, that's just really our next step. It's kind of changing as we go along. We will ultimately, the leadership's not going to want to pick winners and losers. Both Assemblywoman Friedman and Assemblywoman Rubio are both Democrats, and they're not going to want to pick a winner or a loser in that group. So what we're sort of expecting to have happen is maybe they'll each get a piece of it. Which piece, we don't know. They will have to work together collaboratively, bring, this is what we really want, this is what we really want, this is what we can give, this is what we can give, this is what we hate, this is what we hate. So all that has to be laid out and brought together, and I would imagine that both authors will end up with some form of this long-term framework as we move forward, and we will see where we're going from there. What I ask from you today, if your agency has not taken a position on this, I would highly encourage you to take a support position on the Rubio legislation. If you are a water district that represents a city, I would ask you to reach out to your city. Kudos to the city of Fountain Valley, who recently took a support position on the Rubio legislation. Kudos to our director, Wayne Osborne, whose district represents Fountain Valley. So if you are in South County and you have relationships with, Mission Viejo or Irvine Ranch, you guys have a relationship with the city of Irvine. I'm sure you guys are talking to them. We need all of these people to get on board and support us on this effort. So unless there are any questions, I am done here, and you can find my Instagram account, and you can post negative comments like my 11-year-old does, and I'm done.
Questions?
Well, I'm not standing up here for my health. I'm pulling up Bill's presentation here. Pardon my, you think I'm, his eyesight is better than mine for sure. All right, we are ready.
Well, the Colorado River is the oldest resource. Southern California has for imported water. Metropolitan Water District started by building the Colorado River. It's very important, and because we have spent the few months before on State Water Project and Oroville Dam, we wanted to make sure you heard the story behind the Colorado River. We have invited Metropolitan's manager of Colorado River Resources, Mr. Bill Hasencamp. Bill has 16 years working with Metropolitan. He's one of those brilliant minds that Metropolitan have, and still is a very nice guy. He is responsible for dealing with the irrigation district, the water agencies, doing all type of changes and exchanges programs. He also design and maintain and implement those water supply projects that has to do with increasing the take that Metropolitan has from the Colorado River. Since his tenure, he has increased actually the production that Metropolitan gets. From 2003, he has doubled the production of that. He is the person responsible for designing those intentionally created surpluses that allow Metropolitan to store water in Lake Mead. He's also a California representative in the Colorado River Salinity Control Forum. And on his personal, before that, I had the pleasure of working with Bill in several occasions during my tenure at Met. One of those was when Metropolitan was doing some testing of large membranes to dissolve Colorado River water at the Yuma plant. We work providing the University of Arizona some input on how to design the research agenda. And there were other instances, and it was always great to work with Bill. As a hobby, Bill likes to run around on a bicycle, and he was crazy enough to go around the United States for 3 months. I don't know how you can stand sitting on that little chair doing that. And as somebody mentioned, he plays 21, but I think he plays better poker. So, Bill, we'd like to hear you.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Jose and Director Dick. It's always very humbling to be introduced by you two. Appreciate it. I do like coming down to Modoc. Modoc's always been a great host, as well as the times I've been at WACO. I looked, the last time I was at WACO was 2013. I'm surprised it had been that long since the last time I addressed this group. I did wake up early this morning to get down here, but I learned from Harvey that don't take the 4 or 5 freeway the whole way. Actually take the 22 and then cut down on Brookhurst. So I tried that this morning, and actually it worked, but it wasn't just Harvey. It was also my Waze app on my phone that told me the fastest way to get here was to take the 22 and come down Brookhurst. In fact, I heard a news story the other day that people are losing their sense of direction because of all of the navigation apps. I don't think I quite buy it, although I did need the phone to find my way to the restroom in this building this morning, so little tough. I have been working on the Colorado River for 15 years. Started right out of college. And I guess it's a perspective. When you write your biography, you can say, well, in 2003, we had very little water on the Colorado River Aqueduct, and so I've helped to implement programs to help fill it back up. Or I could say, actually, in 2002, the year I started, the aqueduct was full every single year, so we're just trying to get back to where it was before. So I guess it's the spin that we can put on it. But in any case, I've been working on it for a long time, but every year is different. It's exciting to face the challenges on the Colorado River. Every year we don't know how it's going to turn out, what challenges we're going to face. We really have to get a lay of the land and where things are going, and then decide how we're going to manage the Colorado River in that particular year. And I realize now that before I got up here, I should have gotten operating instructions because I'm not sure how to advance the... Just the arrows. Okay, there's no clicker. Okay. All right, I can do that. So no wandering around the room to give their presentation. Okay. That's that. So a little bit about the background. Of course, you know where our water comes here in Southern California. Most of our imported water is from the State Water Project and the Colorado River Aqueduct. LA Aqueduct, up until this year, had just been a trickle during the drought, but this year they're actually having a good supply, and in fact, more water than LA can manage, and LA is trying to figure out what to do with all that water. But for the rest of us, about 45% of average supply comes from the Colorado River, and about 55% of our imported supply, the State Water Project. But beyond those averages, when we need the water the most, the Colorado River is the more important supply. During the drought, when we had only 5% of our State Water Project supplies in Northern California, we received 1.2 million acre-feet on the Colorado River. And that really saved us getting through this drought. We couldn't have survived and couldn't have gotten through it nearly as well without the ability to have our aqueduct full when we needed it the most. Now, I look at the State Water Project as the dog, and the Colorado River Aqueduct is the tail of the dog. And that's because it's really the state project that determines how we're going to operate the Colorado River Aqueduct every year. In years when the state project doesn't do much, then we got to go to the Colorado and get a whole bunch of water and figure out how to fill it up and negotiate on the fly as we go. And then in years like this, when there's so much water in Northern California, we have to figure out how to dramatically cut back our Colorado supplies. So it's kind of a wait and see. Every year is a little different. And to illustrate that, the Colorado River Aqueduct deliveries into our service area, dramatic changes. During the peak of the drought in 2014, 2015, almost 1.2 million acre-feet, essentially a full aqueduct except for a couple shutdowns, coming into our service area. This year, we're ramping down as low as we could possibly go, perhaps only 150,000 acre-feet of Colorado River water going through the San Jacinto Tunnel. Almost 10% or 12% of the water that we delivered just a few years ago. So we've never come close to doing anything like that, delivering that small amount of water to Southern California. We've never taken so much state project water as we're trying to do this year and taken so little Colorado River. So how are we able to take our supplies and take them so low without losing water? Well, one is with our accounts with Desert and Coachella. We have an exchange agreement with Desert and Coachella, which I think is one of our best agreements that we have at Metropolitan, but we don't talk about it very much. It's the ability to store huge volumes of water out in the Coachella Valley, just north of Palm Springs, and provide that water to Desert Water Agency and Coachella Valley Water District. And then in exchange for us delivering this water, we get their state project water. And it works really well for us because in a year like this, we're going to deliver 350,000 acre-feet out in the desert, more than we've ever delivered in the history of this agreement. We've changed our facilities so we can maximize the deliveries out there. And if you get a chance to go out there this summer, it's quite an impressive feat. It's just off the 10 freeways, only a mile north on Whitewater Road. You can just walk up to this and see 700 CFS ripping through the desert. It's quite a sight to see. Especially on a hot day, you get that mist from the water. It feels kind of nice. So this is a great program that we are fully maximizing this year. The other thing that we're doing, I think our second best program that we have at Met, is our ability to store water in Lake Mead. We got this right in 2007, and we can store water without any costs quickly by not diverting it, leaving it in the reservoir, and taking it in a future year. And this year, we're looking at storing a record amount, 400,000, by far the most we've ever stored in Lake Mead. And it's a great program because no cost, and we can get it back quickly when we need it. In contrast, on the state project, we do have the ability to store our water in San Luis Reservoir through carryover storage, but that water is very risky that it might spill. And we're going to store a lot of water on the state side this year, and most likely a lot of that's going to spill because San Luis isn't big enough. But Lake Mead will not spill anytime soon, so it's a safe place to put water, and we can quickly access it. So we're really ramping up those two things like we've never done in the history of Metropolitan between Desert Water Agency and Coachella Valley Water District. Now, the Colorado Basin as a whole, this map that was in the 2012 basin study shows not just the basin itself, but where water comes outside the basin to meet urban demands. And it shows, the outline of the basin. We know that Phoenix and Las Vegas are in the basin, but water goes to Salt Lake City outside the basin. It goes to Denver in the Front Range. It goes to Cheyenne. It goes to Santa Fe, Albuquerque. Of course, Imperial, Coachella Valleys, and Met. So the Colorado is one of those losing basins. It's not that the demand inside the basin itself isn't that much. There's a lot of demand outside. Whereas the Rio Grande over in New Mexico, that's a gaining basin. There's diversions into that basin. So there's a drain outside in the Colorado Basin, and of course it never reaches the ocean. It dries up about 100 miles short of reaching the Gulf of California in almost every year. And you probably heard last year, Lake Mead hit its lowest level ever. Significant event when the largest reservoir in the United States reaches its lowest level ever. This was back in May or June of last year. It was all over the news about the record low amounts. And it's hard to understand how low this reservoir is. You can stand on the edge and look down and you can see that bathtub ring. But it's such a big, monstrous canyon, it's hard to understand how low that is. So to try to get an idea of how far down Lake Mead is, if you took every reservoir in the State Water Project, Lake Oroville and San Luis and Castaic and Pyramid, and if you took every reservoir on the Central Valley Project, Shasta, the biggest reservoir in California, and Lake Folsom and Trinity Supplies, and then every reservoir here in Southern California, Diamond Valley Lake, which is just about to be full, and Lake Paris and some of the others. If you took all of those reservoirs today and poured them into Lake Mead, if you could, a big funnel, you still wouldn't fill Lake Mead up. It would still be down below its full pool. So it's a huge hole that will likely never be filled in our lifetimes. And we're not really thinking about Lake Mead ever being full again. We're thinking about managing it. And this photo shows Lake Mead in 1999. Last time it was full, all the way up to where it reached into the Grand Canyon National Park there. Today it's 60 miles shorter. So the Colorado River, is now 60 miles long before it ultimately hits Lake Mead. Nowhere near the Grand Canyon anymore. And one of the interesting outcomes of this drawdown has to do with St. Thomas, Nevada. Now, St. Thomas was a town that was on the Virgin River that was a bustling town at the time in the 1930s. But when they were going to build Hoover Dam, this town would be inundated. So they knew that they would have to pack up their belongings and leave the town. And so they had plenty of time, plenty of warning as Lake Mead slowly filled up and encroached on the town. And it was underwater for decades. But now it's become a tourist attraction because that old town has been high and dry for many years, and the National Park Service has trails, and you can see what the school buildings used to be and where the foundation is, and it's quite an interesting area not too far from Mesquite, Nevada, if you're up that way. But while Lake Mead is so low, record low, lowest ever, the Colorado Basin is not really in a drought. In fact, the West isn't in a drought at all. The drought monitor as of this week shows there's a couple places in the edges that are maybe a little dry, but there's no drought. Certainly California drought finally ended, but the Colorado Basin hasn't been in drought in several years either. In fact, if you look at the total storage in the Colorado system, all of the reservoirs combined, it dropped pretty significantly from 2000 to 2004, but over the last 10, 12 years, it's been more or less steady. We haven't seen the Colorado reservoirs drying out. We're only seeing Lake Mead. It's a Lake Mead problem that we're focusing on. So why is it then, if we're not in a drought and Lake Mead's at this record low level, what's going on? Well, part of it you have to understand back the beginning of the last century when farmers went to the Imperial Valley and found a great place to irrigate. It was a place that almost never rained, and there was an abundance of water from the Colorado River, and it didn't get cold. You could grow vegetables year-round. But there was one problem in the Imperial Valley, and that was that the Colorado River was uncontrolled. And in 1906, when there was a wet year on the Colorado River, it broke through its irrigation channels and flowed uncontrollably through the Imperial Valley. And as it flowed through the valley, it cut its channel. This is the new river cutting its channel as the Colorado River flowed uncontrollably into the formerly dry Salton Sink. And it cut this channel as Mark Reisner described it, a waterfall marching up in reverse through the Imperial Valley as this huge amount of river went through its cutting a new channel. And this shows some of the erosion. You can imagine that a year earlier that was just flat across, and now there's a farmer looking at what used to be buildings and whatever else was there is now a huge drop as the Colorado River cut through its channel. And of course, as it went down, it formed the Salton Sea and did a lot of damage and flooding of the Salton Sea. And in the picture here in 1906, the rise of the Salton Sea as it flooded that area and was formed. It took about a year and a half before the engineers at the time were able to stop the Colorado River from flowing into the Salton Sea. And in that time, the Salton Sea was formed. Interestingly, the Salton Sea was born in 1906, and now here in 2017 is the last year that the Salton Sea will be as we know it. It's going to change forever starting next year. So we're getting the end of the life of the sea, at least as far as a fishery and the size that it is. It's all about to change this year. But it started back in 1906. And so in order for Imperial Valley and ultimately for MWD to tie into the Colorado River, we needed a dam to control the waters of the river. We can't have this wildly fluctuating river. And the perfect site that was chosen was Black Canyon near present-day Las Vegas, Nevada. Perfect dam site. But so California wanted Congress to build the dam, or the federal government to approve the dam so that Reclamation can build it. But we had to sit down, however, with the other states to get an interstate agreement so that the feds could build Hoover Dam. And the concern of the other states were that if, under existing law, the doctrine of first in time, first in right applies. And California was starting to grow and use water. The other states thought that if we don't do something, California will take the lion's share of the Colorado River, and they will then forever have that higher right to the river than the other states. So in 1922, the states got together in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the Bishop's Lodge, kind of a nice place if you've ever been there, and sat down and negotiated a deal to protect their future rights. And that deal was the 1922 Colorado River Compact. And it said that regardless of how much water California uses today or at that time, we're going to reserve 7.5 million acre-feet for the upper basin, 7.5 for the lower basin states, which is Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. And then later in 1944, they knew there was going to be a treaty with Mexico. It was finally formalized in 1944 of 1.5 million acre-feet, as well as an additional 1 million acre-feet for the lower basin. That 1 million acre-feet was to address the tributaries flowing through the state of Arizona, the Gila River and some of those rivers. So the total allocation was 17.5 million acre-feet. And with that, the states then felt comfortable to approve the building of Hoover Dam. And in 1928, construction began, not long after the compact was signed, and it was finally completed in the 1930s and filled rather rapidly. Here is when it reached its ultimate highest level ever in 1983, when the Colorado River spilled and uncontrollably spilled, and there was a lot of flood damage below. That was an interesting year. People came from all over to see the spillways ripped down. So later, through a series of other agreements, the two basins got together and negotiated each of their own amounts. So the lower basin took their 7.5 and said California gets 4.4, Arizona 2.8, Nevada 300,000. The reason why Nevada only got 300,000 was because they didn't envision 21. They didn't envision a gambling mecca. This was all about irrigation demand. That's where most of the water was going, and there's no irrigation in Nevada, essentially. So most of the irrigation was Arizona and California, and that's where the lion's share of the water went. There was also this extra 1 million acre feet for the lower basin that wasn't really assigned to anyone, but understood that it was supposed to address the tributaries. And that became very significant in the 1960s. And so this should be the end of the story. Colorado's been divided. Every state's got their apportionment. We don't need a Colorado River Program Manager because it's a simple, straight story. But that's not the end. That's not. Things are never as simple as they ought to be. One is, I'm sure you've heard, the Colorado River is overallocated. That when they divided up the river in 1922, they thought the runoff was around 18 million acre feet. They didn't have a full hydrologic record, and it happened to be a relatively wet period. But we know now that the runoff is closer to 15 million acre feet, or maybe even a little less if you add in some of the more recent years. So there's a long-term problem on the Colorado River that there's more water allocated than there is supply. But that's not what's going on now. That is not the problem now. Despite what you read in the paper, this is not the issue today. Because today the upper basin demands are low enough that actually the Colorado River is in balance today. And that's why that graph I showed earlier showed that on the whole, the Colorado Basin is not drying out. So then what's going on? Why is Lake Mead at a record low level? And why is this not the problem? Well, the problem in the lower basin is unique, and it really has to do with a decision in the 1960s from Arizona versus California. And Arizona and California never seemed to get along. They were always arguing from the beginning. When we wanted to build Parker Dam, Arizona sent out the Arizona Navy to try to block Parker Dam from crossing into Arizona. But as they were out there in the heat, the Arizona forces that were trying to block got hungry and ran out of food, so they came over to Metropolitan staff, and we fed them lunch, and it wasn't much of a threat. But we did ultimately, of course, build those reservoirs, but Arizona was never happy. They always felt like they were getting the short end of the stick. And one of the key decisions had to do with the lawsuit that ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and it had to do with that 1 million acre feet extra. And one of the reality in Arizona is that the Gila River, which includes the Verde and the Salt River Project, if you're familiar with that, all of that water that flows through Arizona and a little bit from New Mexico is about 2 million acre feet of runoff. And Arizona uses it all. They use it all. Almost never reaches the ocean except in some flash flood years. And so California took the position, well, Arizona gets 2.8 million acre feet off the river, plus this extra million, so Arizona's total water use is 3.8 million acre feet. That's what California said. That's what we agreed in the compact. And Arizona said, no, that's not the way it works. We get all of our tributary water plus 2.8 million off the river. We never agreed to that 1 million acre feet as a cap. And so the issue for California was if Arizona counted the tributaries as part of their compact deliveries, then they were already maxed out, and California could continue to take extra water that we had been taking every year. Ultimately, the decision went to the Supreme Court, and California didn't have very good lawyers, apparently, at the time. But Arizona won. And Arizona, the Supreme Court said, tributaries don't count. Arizona gets all the tributary use plus 2.8 off the river, which means that, effectively, Arizona gets 4.9 million acre feet of water. More water than California, even. But at the time, they knew that there wasn't enough water in the system to meet that, because the release requirements from the upper basin were to release enough so that the lower basin could stay within its allocation of 7.5 plus 1, not 7.5 plus 2.1. So that decision threw the basin out of whack, at least the lower basin. Arizona knew that, but they won, so they wanted then to go ahead and build an aqueduct to take water to Phoenix and Denver through the Central Arizona Project. But California had one ace left up its sleeve, so we weren't terrible poker players. We were able to count some cards, and we had some ace up our sleeve, and that CAP did not do what Metropolitan did. Metropolitan funded our aqueduct within our service area through local bonds, no federal funding, which means no strings attached. CAP, however, they wanted the federal government to come and build or Arizona wanted the federal government to build the CAP with subsidized funds and subsidized money, which means that Congress had to approve it, which means that strings could be attached. And California had enough influence to attach some strings to say, okay, the Bureau of Reclamation can build the CAP for you. However, if and when there's ever a shortage on the Colorado River, CAP is junior in priority to California. So Arizona didn't like that at the time. They balked. They said, well, there's not enough water to sustain the deliveries for the CAP in perpetuity, but we'll go ahead and build. We'll go ahead and build it. And at the time, knowing that it wasn't sustainable, but they believed at the time, or what they say now is they believe that the federal government would somehow augment the Colorado River system to provide extra water so that this would become sustainable. Of course, no such augmentation happened, and we've had this drawdown at Lake Mead ever since. So in 2000, Lake Mead was full, because that was really before agencies started taking all of their water. And then every year with the CAP taking their water, in addition to the other users, Lake Mead goes down. It goes down in dry years. It goes down in average years. It even goes down in marginally wet years. Only in really wet years like 2011 and 2005 does it go up. But Lake Mead is like going to Vegas. You might get lucky and hit a jackpot every once in a while. But in the end, the odds are stacked against you. And it's going to go down. That's just the way it is, and because of the current system. It's not drought that's taken it down. It's the fact that Lower Basin, through the Supreme Court, was given more water than was negotiated in 1922. And in fact, we've been getting more releases than we were required to under the compact. So this is the releases from the Upper Basin, Lake Powell into Lake Mead since 2001. And the normal compact amount, the amount that was agreed to in 1922, was that the Lower Basin would release 7.5 million plus half of the Mexico Treaty, so 8.25 million acre feet was how much the Upper Basin would give the Lower Basin every year. And that amount is the amount the Lower Basin is supposed to live with. But because the Upper Basin isn't still fully using all of their water, they've been giving us extra releases. So we've been benefiting by getting more water than we should, not less. So these are not drought year releases. We've actually still been getting more water than we should in the future. So once the Upper Basin starts using their water and they only release 823, it's going to put even more pressure on the Lower Basin and more pressure on Lake Mead. Now, within California, we've done a great example of being sustainable. We were unsustainable when I took this job in 2002. We were taking 5.1 million acre feet, and our allocation was only 4.4. And you've heard this story before. You know we were taking a lot of water, and so we made California sustainable. Metropolitan was the one that was at risk, so we're the ones that were driving the process to make California sustainable, because when California went from 5.1 down to 4.4, Metropolitan lost 60% of its water. And so we did things like fund conservation with Imperial Irrigation District. Both Metropolitan and San Diego County Water Authority are funding these programs. We line the All-American and Coachella canals that formerly lost about 100,000 acre feet of water. We paid farmers in Palo Verde Irrigation District to not grow crops, paying them more than they would make if they were farming, to incentivize them to let some of their land lay rest and have the conserved water come to Southern California. We implemented agreements with Nevada to help jointly manage our water. And of course, our Lake Mead program, where we stored water in Lake Mead, that really helped us in the drought. Going into the drought, we had 580,000 acre feet of water in Lake Mead. That's about 6 feet of water in Lake Mead with Metropolitan's name on it, that we've been taking out to help us survive the critical drought that we recently been experiencing. And now we're almost empty again. And some look at that and say, oh, shoot, we're almost out. That's bad news. I say, no, that's good news. We used all that water. We put that water in there to use, and we timed it perfectly that we emptied it right when the drought ended. So this was an extremely successful program that we could not have survived anywhere as well as we did if we didn't have this right to bank water in Lake Mead. So beneficial. And if you look at a snapshot of 2015 during the height of the drought, how we got our full aqueduct was all of these programs and investments, taking water out of storage, doing these transfers, all of that to refill our supplies. Those are the types of things that that is an example of how you can maintain full deliveries in a sustainable way. Now, these are not cheap programs. California, State of California, San Diego County, and Metropolitan have collectively invested billions of dollars to reduce ag demand and do these programs. So it was a big investment, but it paid off in big ways. Now, why can't we do this on the State Water Project? Why can't we take our enforcement, which is pretty small, and add all these programs on the State Project? Why can we do it on the Colorado? It's not just that I'm a good negotiator, but the reality is our Colorado situation is much different from the state, because on the Colorado, we're the only game in town. We're the only ones right now today in the Colorado River that are short of water in dry years. Arizona, Phoenix, Las Vegas, all the ag districts all have plenty of water. Despite what you may have heard, they all today have plenty of water. They have more water. They all have more water than they need. So when Metropolitan needs to acquire some water, we're the only one out there buying water. So we're in a great position. We can go to Nevada, cut a deal, Arizona, the farmers in California. And we can control the price because we're the only one out there that's really needing a lot of water in a short period of time. Contrast the state project. 5% allocation a few years ago. 26 contractors were all scrambling for water. And there wasn't much to sell. There was just a few sellers and tons of buyers. So the price went up, and the supplies went down, down, down. $1,000 an acre foot, $1,500 an acre foot. Some places $2,000 an acre foot for small amounts of water. So in the state, we really don't have that luxury that we do on the Colorado because we're essentially a monopoly on we're the buyer and we can then control the market and control how things are going. So back to Lake Mead, and it has been going down. We've been, in addition, climate change will likely aggravate the imbalance. And this, as a snow globe of a man watching TV, and he says, scientists now believe there may be a connection between the recent earthquakes and the record snowfall. We don't really know what climate change is going to do or how it's going to impact. There's a lot of studies that say it's going to be worse. Perhaps it will be worse. The basin study said runoff might be 30% lower in the future than it is today. But it's not going to help things, but we've already got an imbalance in the system anyway today. So we today need to start to address the long-term challenges. Because while everyone else has enough water today, soon that won't be the case. So we've been meeting with the other states to develop drought contingency plans to say, what are we going to do in the event that Lake Mead keeps going down? We've been negotiating this for quite a while, and we have a draft proposal that all of the agencies have conceptually agreed to, at least the staff. We haven't gone to the boards for approval. We've informed our boards, but no board has approved this yet. We're still in discussion. And the plan is to try to slow the decline of Lake Mead. Now, the existing rules say that when Lake Mead gets down to 1075, Arizona takes shortages with Nevada a little bit for about 330,000 total. And if Lake Mead drops, the shortages increase up to 500,000 acre feet if Lake Mead were to be 50 feet lower than it is today. These aren't enough to stop Lake Mead from going down. They're enough to slow it, but not stop it. So the question is, some argue, well, CAP, because of their junior right, can go to 0 before California's cut back. So why should California do anything? Why don't we just let Phoenix go dry before we take action? We think that's a bad strategy. We think that we're all in this together. We all are working on the Colorado together. So even though we have a higher right, we are sitting down and working and saying we are willing to consider giving up some water to help solve the problem. And so these additional reductions have been negotiated that says, okay, on top of the existing shortage rules that have already been agreed to, each state would have additional contributions if Lake Mead were to go down. And California, if Lake Mead were to be 30 feet lower than it is today, would contribute 350,000 acre feet, or 200,000, ultimately up to 350,000 acre feet. That's about 8% cutback if Lake Mead were to keep going down. And within California, we have an agreement, tentative agreement, that IID would take 60% of the share, and PVID 7%, and Coachella 8%, and Met 25%. However, it's also understood that we would help finance some of the reductions from the ag agencies to help them make their contributions. And if this then happens, the million acre foot reduction on the lower end, that is enough to stop Lake Mead from going down. That would be enough to reverse the trend. The other important thing in the agreement that we get out of it, in addition to helping Lake Mead get sustainable, is that right now, in shortages, if we've ever had a shortage, we've never had one yet, we've come close, could be a year or two away, is that in shortages, Arizona takes the position that you can't do the things that you've been doing to fill your aqueduct by storing water in Lake Mead and getting it out. They say, in a shortage, you can't get it out. You can put it in, but you can't get it out. We've disagreed with them and say, no, we think we can. But that would probably end up in a lawsuit if we don't have agreement. So this agreement, in exchange for us agreeing to give up some water if Lake Mead goes down, we would continue to do the things that we do to provide flexibility to fill our aqueduct by storing water in Lake Mead and recovering it, do our exchange with Nevada, and we're exploring an agreement with Mexico to fund conservation in Mexico and have the savings shared between the two countries, and some of it come to us. We've already done that in Minute 319 that was approved in 2012, where Met, Southern Nevada, and Central Arizona Project all are funding conservation in Mexico with the water shared between the two countries. We're looking at a much bigger deal that we would take to our board as early as August of this year, that we would fund a long-term conservation program in Mexico and have access to that water. But we need this agreement to ensure that we can get it in all conditions. And why it's so important is now, because of this year, our plans are, again, to refill Lake Mead. So we're down at 50. We want to store 400,000 in Lake Mead this year. And if it's even average next year, because our reservoirs are so full, probably another 200 next year. So by the end of next year, we might have 2/3 of a million acre feet in Lake Mead. And we need the ability to get that back out when the next drought comes around. So this agreement would help that to happen. But one of the challenges, the biggest challenge that we're facing, however, is IID has said, before we agree to do this, we need a path forward on the Salton Sea. And the reason they say that is because if they conserve water and put it in Lake Mead, that's going to put further strain on the Salton Sea, which is already reaching the end of its life as we know it. Now, back in 2003, when the agreements to transfer water from IID to San Diego were negotiated, it was recognized that by transferring water to San Diego would have a negative impact on the Salton Sea. And so it's now, Salton Sea on its own has been getting saltier. It's 50% saltier than the ocean. Most of the fish have died. It increases by about 1% a year. But in 2003, there was an agreement that says, okay, we'll give the state 15 years to come up with a solution for the Salton Sea. And in order to give the state time, we will put extra water into the sea so that the transferring water to San Diego has no impact to the Salton Sea. So every year, IID's been delivering extra water to the Salton Sea. 800,000 acre feet total. This year alone, they're going to deliver about 120,000 acre-feet just to evaporate. And it just deliver it and evaporates the same year. That all comes to an end this year. And the state, and starting next year, the Salton Sea will begin to shrink quite a bit, quite rapidly, as the transfer to San Diego picks up. Right now, IID is transferring 100,000 to San Diego. By 2021, it's going to be 200,000 acre-feet. And when that happens, without this mitigation water to the sea is going to shrink rapidly and get saltier quickly. And the big issue with the sea, at one point, the big issue was fish, right? The fish and the birds. Now the issue is dust. Dust. It's all about dust. And this is, of course, the end of that period, 6 months to go or 9 months to go. The state slowly started. They did a draft EIR in 2008. That was the preferred alternative, a series of dikes and pumps, and I think it was, you could call it a Disneyland out in the desert. They tried to do everything, which cost $9 billion and $100 million annual O&M. So nobody wanted to touch it. There was no funding source for that. So IID got frustrated. They filed a petition in 2014. There have been a series of workshops. And what IID is saying is, we want relief from having to transfer water to San Diego if there's no path forward on the sea, because we don't want the area to become a dust bowl. We want you, State Board, to tell our transfer is conditional upon a Salton Sea plan. State Board didn't touch it. They held hearings, they held workshops, but the State Board doesn't want to address the issue. So the federal government came in and they did an MOU last fall up at Lake Tahoe, and Barack Obama said how important the Salton Sea was to the region. Secretary Jewell, on her way out, issued a directive saying we are going to continue to work on a path forward to the Salton Sea. Last month, IID, again frustrated, sent another letter to the State Board saying we want you to have a hearing right away on this issue. The time's almost up. Still nothing's happened. Now, the state did come out with a 10-year plan for the Salton Sea that they released that at least has some funding identified for the first part. And so the state is trying to move forward, but they still haven't. Really, the issue is, what is the funding going to be for a solution that's hundreds of billions of dollars? That's the real issue, is where's that money coming from? And what's going to happen at the end of this year? What is IID going to do? Not only would they say we're not going to do this plan to save Lake Mead, but they might also threaten to end some of the transfer to San Diego. So it's going to be an interesting year to see where that leads. Finally, we have been working on a couple new efforts to reduce water use on the river. We have our long-term transfers. We did some new pilot programs. One is with Bard Water District. It's the one entity in California that didn't participate in any of the transfers. So we're in the second year of a summer seasonal fallowing program. And the way Bard works is, in the winter, when the weather is good, they grow vegetables. And that's where most of the profit comes from the land. It doesn't take much water to grow winter vegetables, and they make most of their money. Then in the summer, it's so hot they can't grow the vegetables. So they throw on some marginal crop that's not very cost-effective, but it uses a lot of water, and they don't make much money for it. So our deal here is to say, well, let's split the pie so it's a win-win. We'll let you grow your winter vegetables and make all your money, and we'll pay you to skip that summer crop, what uses all your water. And so we're in the second year of that program. We've heard a lot of interest throughout the basin that people want to do this. They say, people in PVID, IID, in Arizona said, that sounds great. I mean, I don't have to farm in 120-degree heat. Perfect. So this is the second year. We're going to have a report on the effectiveness of that. The other thing that we did recently was buy a lot of land in PVID. We're the largest landowner in the Palo Verde Valley. We bought it not to fallow it, because we had a commitment to the community that we would not fallow more land than our agreement, which is we would only fallow a third of the land at most in any year, and less if we don't need it. So we said we're not going to fallow more, but we're going to incentivize farmers, our tenants, our lessees, to be more efficient and use 30% less water. And to use 30% less water, if you use 30% less water, we'll give you a big discount on your rent. So rental rates that are almost half in exchange for our farmers using 30% less water. And they can do that by switching crops. Don't grow alfalfa, grow organics, other crops that take less water, or by putting in drip irrigation, or by skipping a summer watering, however they want to do it, because those farmers are pretty smart. So we just approved those leases last month. I think the final lease was done. And that's another experiment to see, can you have farming be sustainable and use less water? So those are two things that we are currently doing on these pilot scales. And if they're both effective, we can roll it out bigger, both in California and other states are also interested. So in summary, it's been Colorado has really saved our bacon through this drought, through this last drought. Every year we try to manage. Like now we're scrambling to store as much as we can. A couple years ago we were scrambling to get as much as we can. But it's not sustainable. We can't. We have to participate with the other states and find a solution to help deal with that problem, and it's going to be one step at a time. The Salton Sea is something that we're going to have to address now in California. We're going to have to. This drought plan that we have, maybe going to our board, is really a short-term deal. It's only through 2025. The big negotiations on the river will start in 2020. That's when all of the rules governing all of the operations are up for renegotiation and change. So that's really the big ticket, and all these things that we're doing to help us prepare for that is going to be key. And as Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it and not just let it happen. So thank you for your time this morning.
Any questions? In the northern California Central Basin, we've released probably between 5 and 7 million acre feet of water going out between the locations. I mean, it's bigger than the whole Colorado deal and everything. What are we doing with all that? I mean, we're getting a little fiddly amount of water out of American California, but there's, several 100,000 cubic feet per second running out to the Golden Gate.
Right. In California, we simply don't have enough storage. Now, this is the wettest year ever, so you can't really use this year as something that you normally plan for. But we all acknowledge we don't have enough storage in California. We are looking at building a new reservoir, Sites Reservoir in Northern California, to help capture some. But our biggest issue is in moving water through the Delta. Our biggest issue is this year we were lucky, but because the San Joaquin River from the south was flowing so much, the biological restrictions didn't kick in. Last year was a wet year, quite a wet year. Oroville spilled last year, but we only got a 60% allocation because of those fishery restrictions. And so a lot of water went out last year when we could have used it. This year a lot of water went out, but we got plenty, so it's not really an issue. So the issue is we need Cal Water Fix so that we have a reliable way of getting the water in those marginally wet years to Southern California.
Can you address along that, about 3 years ago we had our Ocean Water Summit, you had a person come in and talk about similar to what you did, and brought back one of the thoughts and points made. We're looking at 30% of the GDP of the United States in ag and other businesses manufacturing use water from Colorado River, which is a huge chunky thing as a nation as a whole. You break it up in macro terms. On the micro side, I know that there's the upper, middle, and lower Colorado breaking up the basin. And it made the comment that the upper basin of Colorado was getting drier. In normal seasons, they said, we always have so much water, we never had a problem of using storage. And now all of a sudden, Colorado itself, where the sources for the river, we don't have any storage. And we were talking about addressing just storage for that region alone. How they address it? Is there any actions towards that so they can create real storage? Because they're saying if we're going to be sure in the drier seasons, we're going to be shipping less water into the river and using more.
Yep, that definitely is a problem that the upper basin faces. Most of their reservoirs are downstream of them. And so once the water goes by them, they can't really use it. Now they can use it for meeting their compact obligations and other downstream requirements, but that doesn't help them if there's no water where they are. And the concern is, right, as it gets hotter and the snow melts sooner, that the growing seasons will shorten because the rivers by August will be drier. So they would like to see small reservoirs higher up on the headwaters to at least capture that so they can use that. So that's not really our issue. That's really a local issue within Colorado. The Colorado is like California. They have their own fights. The west slope and the east slope are fighting, and the senior rights are downstream, so they're saying, well, if you build a dam, we got to protect our rights. So within Colorado, they have a lot of those issues. We tend to stay out of that here in California.
It's kind of a shame that the Salton Sea is at the state right now, but it's kind of easy to predict from 50 years ago that nobody's going to pay for this. It's likely that the Salton Sea is going to dry up. Do you think the San Diego agreement with that will just go away and San Diego won't get that water anymore?
So, it's unfortunate because back in 2002, there was pressure on Metropolitan to help pay for the Salton Sea. And we said, no, our transfer is not impacting the sea. But what we said was, if we get some water, we'll help pay for the Salton Sea. And we had two agreements that said, one is if we ever get surplus water from the Colorado River, which at the time in 2002, the outlook was pretty good. We said we would pay in today's dollars about $30 an acre foot for surplus. So if we got 1 million acre feet, that would be $30 million. Not a lot, but something. The other more important transfer or piece, we said that if the state can determine that instead of IID putting the water into the sea to evaporate, they would instead transfer it to Metropolitan, that 800,000 acre feet, we would agree to pay about $3.25 in today's dollars an acre foot. So hundreds of millions of dollars could have been available from Met if that water, instead of just going to evaporate, could have, or at least some of it, come to us. But the state didn't want to go there. It was too political, too much of a hot button. So there were opportunities that we tried to cooperate with them. I testified before the state board several times. Hey, you want some money? Here's a quick way to get hundreds of millions of dollars. But they didn't like it. So who knows what's going to happen? San Diego's definitely, I'm sure they're nervous about what's going to happen. The big issue is the Clean Air Act and the EPA. I mean, they're already in a non-attainment down there. And L.A. has spent $1 billion on Owens Lake to stop the dust there, and they're still violating. They're still on the hook for more. So the question is, if there's dust that causes air quality violations, could the whole transfer get shut down? What could happen? What are the legal risks? There's a lot of uncertainty. So everyone would like to see a plan forward to address that, but it'll be interesting as we go through the rest of the year to watch what happens.
Really, there's a very simple solution to this whole problem with San Diego and Arizona. If you go out to the Delta, take some of the Delta smells, bring them down there and clear the water off, and you continue water.
Yeah, we're fortunate. I know you're joking, but we are fortunate on the Colorado. We do have our own version of Delta smelt. We do have bony-tailed shub and pike minnow that are endangered, and there's a lot of them. But the difference is we're pumping out of Lake Havasu, and Lake Havasu is an artificial lake that the endangered species, they don't like. They like the river portion. So they're upstream in the river, and we're not taking them in and killing them. Whereas in Northern California, they're right by our intakes. It's hard not. You have to stop pumping to stop taking. But in the Colorado, we don't have that issue, mostly just because of the way we're pumping.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you again.
Well, anybody has anything to add to the meeting? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.